Welcome to Fix It Home Improvement, covering projects that every homeowner should know and great products for home and garden.
Hi, I'm JC, and this is where we share weekly home improvement tips. I'm here with my co-host Cindy.
Hello, JC.
Hi, Cindy. Today we're going to be talking about sanders, and we'd like to thank Bob Elias for liking and sharing the podcast. In the 1200s in China, sanding paper was made from animal skin with crushed shells, seeds, and sand glued to one side of it. So it should be like sanding skin. Shark skin was also used to sand surfaces. Glass paper was manufactured in London in 1833, so they glued these fine particles of glass, broken glass to paper, and that's what they used for sanding.
Ouch.
And then it wasn't until 1926 where Porter Cable created the first take-along sander. So they finally got the electric motor small enough so they could have a handheld tool. For sanding projects around the house, most homeowners are probably going to use either a portable power sander, a block sander, or a sanding sponge. For many projects, even if you're using a power sander, you usually want to finish it off by hand to get the best results. And there's three main types of power sanders: belt, orbital, and random orbital.
Are we going to get into each of these?
Okay. With a belt sander, you've got this long looped sheet of sandpaper, and they call it a belt, and this is spinning over two drums, and you're using this for large flat areas, and this is going to remove material very fast. These standard sizes are 3-inch by 18, 3 by 21, 3 by 24, and 4-inch by 24-inch. And the 3-inch by 21-inch is the most common. It's kind of an easy size to control. With some of these belts, though, make sure that you're looking at them when you purchase it, because some are directional, so they're going to have it marked with arrows which way it's supposed to be spinning. And then some are non-directional, so it doesn't matter which way you put on the belt.
You can put it on backwards?
Yes. Yeah, isn't that weird?
That's strange. Why would they do that?
I'm sure the way they lay the grit, it's designed so that it removes the most material, which is interesting that they can control the grit.
Yeah.
With a belt sander, you're going to have a dust collection system. So you're going to have a built-in dust bag, a filter, or attachments where you can put a hose up to a shop vac.
Oh, that's nice.
Which is pretty cool. And because they're so powerful and they remove material so fast, you want to make sure that you're not pushing down on the sander. You're actually just using its weight to do the work, and you want to make smooth, long, level passes over the material. If you're tipping this or changing speed or direction, you can actually create gouges in the wood.
That sucks.
And manufacturers recommend hearing protection and a dust mask with a belt sander.
Well, you do need to be careful of your fingers with this.
Well, it's crazy because you can actually remove metal like at the hardware stores.
Right, and skin.
Yeah, fast. So I mean, it's pretty good at removing stuff. And a belt sander with a variable speed is actually good. If you're working with wood veneer, it's going to give you more control. Or if you're working on delicate pieces of wood, variable speed is really a nice thing to have. And for smaller pieces of wood, like if you're doing shelving and you're smoothing it out, let's say removing paint, you want to make sure that you're clamping these down, because a belt sander can grab hold of it and just whip that piece of wood across the room.
So you should wear a helmet too?
Yeah, protective gear. And because the belt moves in one direction, you want to make sure that you're going with the grain of the wood. And then if you're sanding a group of boards, so like that, if we have a bunch of shelves that we're doing, it's hard to control it sometimes on a narrow surface. So what a lot of guys do is they'll take all the shelves and put them together so you have a wider surface, and just do all the edges at the same time, have them clamped together. So it's much easier to use, and you're not going to round off the edges. If you're sanding a large piece of wood that you plan on cutting down to size, you can sand that first and then cut it.
And that makes sense.
That way you don't round off the corners for that also.
Right.
If you use your belt sander to sharpen tools like an axe, you should clean out your dust collection system first, because the sparks can ignite the wood dust.
Wow, that sucked.
And then you can use a bench vise to hold a tool like that, and then just use the belt sander, and it does an amazing job of removing metal. I would also get in the habit of turning the trigger off after
Or any tool, really, don't you think?
Yeah, because this is one you don't want to plug in and have the trigger on. Belt sanders just do a great job. If you have doors, tabletops, large pieces of furniture, or even a door that sticks, belt sander does a great job of just removing a little bit of material along the edge so your door opens and closes. It knocks down rough surfaces. It'll take off varnish, paint, or stain very quickly. I would also, if this is the first time I've used a belt sander and I'm going in for projects around the house, just bought a belt sander,
Right.
practice on a scrap piece of wood
Yeah.
before you start going after some furniture. Another type of sander is an orbital sander, so you can call these finish sanders or palm sanders or quarter sheet sanders.
That's a lot of names.
And what's popular is a quarter sheet of standard 9-inch by 11-inch sandpaper, so you're going to cut it and only use a quarter of it. And then you can also get these orbital sanders where they're a third of a sheet or a half of a sheet.
Right.
And then these sheets are usually held in place with a spring-loaded clip, or you can get sheets that have pressure-sensitive adhesive. So if you see PSA marked on sandpaper, they have this adhesive on the back. And the pads have square ends, so they're going to fit into a corner real well.
Right.
And these are lightweight, they're easy to control, they're relatively quiet. And the pad itself is going to orbit in small little circles, so it's not removing a lot of material. So this is really good for light or moderate sanding, very easy to control. The problem is it can leave small swirls in the finish because that's the way they vibrate. And some manufacturers, because of this vibration, actually recommend wearing anti-vibration gloves for big projects. So if you're doing a lot of work.
Right, yeah.
And with the orbital sanders, they can also have dust collection systems, and the sheets of the sandpaper have little holes in it, and so it sucks the dust up through these holes into either a filter or you can put it onto a shop vac.
Because that's one of the worst things about sanding is the amount of dust. And
Right, it makes a mess, especially if you're trying to do it inside.
Yes.
Terrible. This is a nice project. If you can get outside, this is a nice project outside. In this group of orbital sanders, you have detail sanders. So these are sanders with small pointed pads to get into corners. And a couple of the top rated, Black & Decker Mouse. The Dremel, Craftsman, and Milwaukee have these multi-tools.
Right.
So you have a detail sander along with these attachments that you can do cutting and sawing with. So they're very handy to have, especially if you just plan on doing a few small projects. Those multi-tools are actually very convenient.
Right.
Another type of sander is the random orbital sander, and this has a round pad. The diameter is usually 5 or 6 inches, and this pad is spinning along with vibrating in random little circles. And because that pad is spinning, it's really going to remove material fast. So you've got to keep moving the sander. You want it at a uniform speed with the grain of the wood. And then that random vibration, it's going to reduce the swirls that you normally get with like a palm sander.
But do you have to be careful not to gouge the wood like you do with a belt sander?
Yeah, so this thing, I mean, if you left it in one place, it's just going to dig a hole. So it does a real nice job of removing material. And this is good for most projects. So this will go anywhere from heavy duty to finish sanding, depending on the grit and the pressure and the speed you're using with the tool. So very versatile. The problem with these circular pads is you can't get into corners.
Yeah.
So if you're doing projects where you have a lot of corners, you're probably going to need either two tools. So you'd have just an orbital sander along with this for the corners, or you would just use like a block sander or a sanding sponge in the corners. The sandpaper you're going to be using with this is going to be held in place either with a hook and loop system, so like Velcro, or pressure-sensitive adhesive. And the hook and loop is the most popular. It's just easy to put on and take off. And the sandpaper is going to have holes in it for dust collection.
Oh, that's nice.
You can get variable speed random orbital sanders, and that's what most professionals like because you can vary then from heavy or delicate work.
Right.
You can get one or two handle depending on the power, and then removable handles. So if you have areas, let's say you're working in cabinets, you can remove one handle to get into tight areas. With this, you want to use very light or no pressure. Just let the tool do the work. You want slow, steady motion, and then you want to overlap each sanding area that you did by a third or half.
Like mowing the lawn?
Exactly. So as you move across your work surface, you want to overlap slightly. And then at the end, you want to stop with only a third of the sander off the edge, and that way you're going to prevent rounding off the edges.
Oh, that's smart.
Some of the top-rated power sanders are from Bosch, DeWalt, Milwaukee, Rigid, and Makita.
I don't think you've spelled it all in this episode.
Bosch, B-O-S-C-H.
Thank you.
And all the rest. When you're purchasing sandpaper, you can get coarse, medium, fine, very fine. And you're also going to see numbers on this. The numbers refer to the grit size, so the diameter of the abrasive material that's on the paper. So with coarse...
Wait, let me explain that.
Okay.
These numbers make no sense. I mean,
and also there's different numbers depending on the manufacturer.
Right.
So it's.
But why can't it just be like, okay, coarse is 1, very fine is 10.
There you go.
But no. Not the case.
So coarse is usually 40 to 50. Some companies it's 60. Medium, 60 to 100. Fine, 120 to 220. Very fine, 240. And it just goes up. You have 1,000.
Like 1,000.
Yeah, and I've seen some companies 2,000.
So from 40 to 1,000. That's a big scale.
So 80 is usually the suggested starting point for the average project that you'd be doing around the house. Mm-hmm. And then with sandpaper, again, just make sure that you're sanding with the grain for the best results. When you sand across the grain, you can tear the wood fibers. Don't buy cheap sandpaper. The better sandpaper is going to have a more uniform particle size to prevent scratches.
Oh, that's interesting.
And then when the sandpaper gets dull, just change it. You're not doing yourself a favor by trying to use it through.
Well, I see, with a sanding block or a sanding sponge, if you tap it and all the dust comes off of there.
Right. Yeah,
at some point, though, it's over with. You need to throw it out.
Right. There's no more sharp edges.
This isn't something you're going to hand down to your children.
Right. So that grit is actually sharp edges, and it slowly wears down or starts to break and expose new sharp.
Right. So you're not doing any real work.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, there's a point where it's ineffective. And most professionals are saying sand through the grits for the best finish. So woodworkers were suggesting when you're doing a project and you really want a nice finish on a piece of wood, start with 80, then go to 100, then go to a 120, then 150, then 180 for most projects around the house. And you're sanding to remove...
And they think most people are going to do this?
Right. Yes.
I think everybody starts with 80 and finishes with 80 with that one sheet of sandpaper.
So what you're doing, as you're moving up in the higher numbers, you're removing the scratches from the previous grit because those larger particles are actually kind of tearing into the surface. And so if you really look at it, or if you're using a really nice quality stain and a covering on that, you're going to see that. So if you sand through the grits, you're really going to get a beautiful finish. The minimum...
So start at 40 and work your way up to 1,000.
So the minimum they're suggesting is 80, 120, 180, or 80, 120, 220. But for a smooth piece of furniture, if the surface is already pretty smooth, you can start at 120, then go to 150, 180, 220, and you're going to get the most professional look. There are 4 main types of sandpaper that you can get at the hardware store. You have garnet, aluminum oxide, silicone carbide, and the synthetics. With garnet, this is a natural mineral that breaks apart as you're sanding, so it's exposing new sharp edges.
Interesting.
Wild, isn't it? So because it breaks up so easily, it's really nice for wood. It leaves a nice finish, but it's not very good for heavy sanding or for metal. You have aluminum oxide, and this is more durable than garnet, and this is one of the most common types of sandpaper you get for your wood projects. In fact, many woodworkers, what they're going to use is aluminum oxide for the initial sanding, and then they're going to finish with the garnet.
Interesting.
With aluminum oxide, it's going to cut much faster than garnet, and this works well on metal, plastic, drywall, and wood, so this is your most versatile sandpaper. Silicone carbide is used with waterproof backings for wet sanding and very good for metal and plastic, but not very popular for wood. The synthetics, like ceramic, are the most expensive. They're going to last much longer, and these are for heavy-duty projects and metal. They're popular with belt sanders. So if you have a big project and you're moving through a lot of material and you want to go through it quickly with less replacement of the belts, the synthetics really do a nice job. You're also going to see open and closed coat on these packages.
Coat?
With closed coat, it's completely covered with grit, so you're going to get very fast, aggressive sanding with a very smooth finish, especially for hard material. For metal, for hard woods, this is what you'd want to use. With open coat, only 50 to 70% of the paper is covered with the grit, so this leaves room for the sanding dust. And so if you have wood with high resins or gummy surfaces, it's not going to clog up as fast. For soft wood, it's a little less aggressive, it's a little slower sanding, but for soft metal like aluminum, brass, and copper, they suggest using open coat, and for soft wood like pine, fir, and spruce. And then a couple of the sites I was looking at, a couple of these woodworking experts said if you just kind of want to be goof-proof, use a closed coat for all your projects, and you're going to get the best finish. but you may get a little more gumming up of the sandpaper.
So I'm assuming that the people that came up with this term, open coat, closed coat, are the same people that decided the number scale for the grits.
Right. They're just clowning around, and
it
it's
doesn't make
stuck.
any sense. Why not just say full or it's a half?
Or not so full.
Yeah.
For small projects or finishing off an area that a power sander can't get to, you can use a sanding block or sanding sponge. And
I've never used a sanding block.
Yeah, they're simple. That's what when I first started investing in real estate, that's the only thing I could afford. So, you can get these really cheap pieces of wood, and they have slits in both ends, and you just cut your sandpaper to size, usually a quarter or half a sheet. You tuck it, you fold it, and tuck it into these slots, and you kind of hold it with your fingers as you're sanding, and it just does a nice job of keeping it flat. Because if you're using your hand and you're trying to hand sand,
it slips. It's it's kind of hard to keep even pressure on it.
Right, so you can get waves in the wood with this block. You can get into corners really nice. You can also get them with clips that hold the paper in place. And then with a sanding sponge, which we started using when we were doing a lot of our drywall projects, and you can use a sanding sponge either wet or dry, so you can dip it to clean it off, or you can dip it to get less dust in the air. But with these sanding sponges, they just do an amazing job.
Well, it's easy to hold. It's easy to use. I like them a lot.
And they're contoured. So if you were sanding down, say, a piece of furniture, it'll change its shape. So it's a sponge, so it'll shape itself to the wood. So they're very nice to use. And you can get these in medium, fine, in one sponge. So you can have the flat edges, and also the narrow edges are covered with the sandpaper, which is really very convenient. So you can either get it all fine, medium, or coarse, or you can get it half and half.
Right.
When you're doing your sanding projects, you want to make sure you're wearing a dust mask, and the most common for woodworking projects would be an N95. So N means it's not oil-proof. 95 means it's going to filter out 95% of these airborne particles. And the best is N100. So it's knocking down 99.9% of the particles in the air. I would get one with 2 straps. You're going to get your best fit. And then some type of an adjustable nose piece or a foam piece around your nose. And now they have some really nice ones with foam all around the outside edge. So they're disposable, but they really seal much better. And then I like something with a valve in the center. And so if you're wearing glasses, it's not going to fog up.
Do you have anything else to add?
I would say the random Orbital Sander is the most versatile. This will do anything from heavy-duty jobs. So if you're buying antiques that have layers of paint or rough surfaces, it will knock that down all the way down to a fine finish. Just be aware that you're going to have a palm sander or a detail sander if you need to get into corners. If I'm looking at a sander, I want the longest cord that's available. And if you're thinking about cordless, go with a lithium-ion battery. These new lithium-ions are just fantastic. They're heavy-duty. They last a long time. They're really doing a great job with these. For the sandpaper, I like the hook and loop. It's the easiest to put on and change. I would get dust collection. And if you use the vacuum attachment, it's actually going to keep the particles from building up. It's going to extend the life of the sandpaper, and you're not going to make as much of a mess.
Well, you should definitely plan where you're doing these projects, because
absolutely.
Sanding makes a mess.
Yeah.
So try and do it outside. Try to do it in your garage.
And wear a dust mask.
And
And then a couple sanding sponges around the house are very convenient for not only your woodworking projects, but for drywall too. Aluminum oxide is the most versatile sandpaper. And then work through your grits.
Oh, yes.
So minimum 80, 120, 180. If you want a pro finish, go 80, 100, 120, 150, 180. Now you know why they have the multi-packs.
Let's wrap this up.
You can subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, the Spotify mobile app, and the Google Play Music mobile app.
If you enjoyed it, please leave us a review.
You can check out our home improvement videos on our YouTube channel, Fix It Home Improvement.
And you can subscribe to that as well.
You can download our book, Home Improvement Solutions, What Every Homeowner Should Know. We're almost ready to send book 3 to the editor.
We've been saying that for many months now.
And I still got a couple chapters I got to finish up.
I know.
And we're going to have it free for a few days, so be prepared to get a free download.
If you enjoyed book 1 and 2, please leave us a 5-star rating and review.
You can email us at fixitpodcast@gmail.com.
Thank you for listening.
Talk to you next week.